Well, we're very far advanced on the China deal. We wanted clarification. We get along very well with President Xi and with China. No, there's no deal because President Xi Jinping is not going to engage in deal-making. I don't believe that there is a deal made just between the two presidents on to the US and US manufacturing. Can't really work without these inputs from the Chinese and American factories are in danger of shutting down because they don't have access to these rare earths made and supplied by China. He thought he could break China. He thought tariffs would bring them to their knees. But today, it's Donald Trump who's begging for a deal with the same China he tried to crush. American factories are shutting down, prices are exploding, and even the military is worried. All because of one man's ego-driven trade war. This isn't strength. This is surrender dressed up in fake deals and desperate headlines. Welcome to Trump's biggest economic disaster. Once Donald Trump stood on stages across America, pounding his fists and promising to crush China with tariffs. He said he'd bring Beijing to its knees, force them to obey American rules, and make the US richer than ever. But now he's smiling awkwardly talking about a very good talk with President Xi. Well, we're very far advanced of the China deal. We wanted clarification. We had a very good talk. I talked to President Xi for, I guess, more than 2 hours. It's a complicated deal, but it's a deal that's, bring us a lot of money and a lot of everything else. And we get along very well with President Xi and with China. Suddenly, China is a friend. Suddenly, this complicated deal is going to bring in money, even though no one has seen it and no one understands what it actually is. Look closely. Trump isn't celebrating victory. He's covering up defeat. On April 2nd, 2025, Trump proudly launched his trade war. He slapped huge tariffs on China and other nations, hoping they would beg to make deals. But that didn't happen. China didn't kneel. They fired back hard. And what followed was not a global win for America. It was a disaster for American factories, small businesses, and everyday people. So why is Trump now acting like nothing went wrong? Because ego doesn't apologize. Ego doesn't admit failure. Instead, it bends the truth, praises enemies, and calls embarrassment a deal. What Trump started as a battle for dominance quickly became a self-inflicted wound, one he's now pretending to heal with vague words and fake smiles. And let's not forget what he once promised. Trade wars are good and easy to win, he said, but this wasn't a war. It was a one-sided attack. And America took the damage. Trump is now chasing the very deal he destroyed. He's not negotiating from power, he's pleading from weakness. This isn't a trade fight anymore, it's damage control, and the one holding all the power isn't Trump, it's Jinping. Ben Rhodes, a seasoned US official, explains what's really happening. Jinping went to say, look, let's just calm this down. You need to rein in your more escalatory, if not crazy, advisors. I also think Jinping, to your question, Alex, is holding a lot of cards here, because in addition to the fact that the global markets are being disrupted, and that led to a lot of Trump supporters putting pressure on them to unwind these tariffs, China has restricted the export of what are called rare earth materials, that they have a massive global monopoly on to the US, and US manufacturing can't really work without these inputs from the Chinese. She doesn't need to scream or threaten. He simply controls the pieces that America needs to survive. Rare earth minerals, magnetic components, critical tech materials. Without them, US factories stop. Planes don't fly, missiles don't launch. Even electric cars shut down. That's not just leverage, that's dominance. Trump may bluster on stage, but in private, his administration knows the truth. China has a monopoly on rare earth materials. When Trump launched tariffs, China responded by tightening the flow of these minerals. Suddenly, American manufacturers were gasping for supplies. Prices soared, production lines halted, and voters, especially in swing states, started feeling the pain. She didn't need to fire a bullet. He simply turned a dial. That's why Trump's advisors are split. Some want to back off, others still want to escalate, but none of them, not one, has a real plan to win. Why? Because they started this war without understanding the battlefield. They underestimated China's grip on the global supply chain. They believed that pressure alone would force surrender. Instead, China stood firm. Trump needs a quick fix, a deal, even if it means swallowing his pride and pretending nothing went wrong. But the American people remember, businesses remember, and the empty shelves and soaring prices are proof that this wasn't a war America won. It was a war. One man started to feed his ego, and it backfired on an entire nation. And American factories are in danger of shutting down because they don't have access to these rare earths, especially these rare earth magnets that are predominantly made and supplied by China. And these are magnets that are used in the steering systems, the brake systems, the engine systems of our automobiles, but also semiconductors, manufacturing robotics, and even our jet airplanes, military airplanes, and ballistic missiles. This is the nightmare Trump didn't see coming. Factories going dark, assembly lines frozen, missiles, jets, and robots left unfinished, not because of war or sabotage, but because of his own trade war. Gary Locatch, a former U.S. ambassador to China and Commerce Secretary, didn't sugarcoat it. The tariffs didn't just hurt China, they crippled America. By targeting Chinese exports, Trump unknowingly cut off America's own oxygen, rare earth magnets, the small but powerful tools behind America's military tech and auto industry. Almost all come from China. When China pulled back exports in response, U.S. companies were caught completely unprepared. This wasn't just an economic hiccup, it was a national security threat. Automakers couldn't finish cars, jet manufacturers couldn't build planes. Military supply chains were suddenly exposed as dangerously dependent on a country Trump had just picked a fight with. He didn't weaken China. He weakened America from the inside out. And the people paying the price weren't wealthy elites or foreign corporations. They were American workers, engineers, factory operators, families. In the Midwest, Trump claimed he was protecting U.S. jobs, but his tariffs forced companies to shut down, lay off workers, and lose millions. This is what happens when policy is built on ego instead of strategy. When a president acts tough without understanding the consequences, Trump thought he was applying pressure. Instead, he broke his own economies. Backbone in China didn't even have to fire a single shot. Worse, Trump didn't have a plan B. There was no alternative supply, no national stockpile, no infrastructure to replace what China controlled. Instead of pressuring China, he gave them all the leverage. They didn't need to negotiate, they just needed to wait. Meanwhile, American businesses began to beg the White House for relief. CEOs who once praised Trump's America First policy were now lobbying for tariff exceptions. Supply managers were scrambling to source parts from anywhere, even at double the cost. Consumers, in the end, got hit with higher prices, product delays, and shrinking options. This wasn't leadership. This was a reckless gamble that risked America's economy and national security, all for a headline and a campaign slogan. Trump didn't defeat China. He handed them the upper hand. And in doing so, he proved that when you fight a war without knowing your enemy's strength, the one who falls isn't your opponent, it's you. This is not the Trump people remember. This isn't the man who once stood at rallies calling China a thief and promising to take them down. Now listen carefully. He sounds more like someone asking for a favor than negotiating from strength. Well, we're very far advanced of the China deal. We wanted clarification. We had a very good talk. I talked to President Xi for, I guess, more than 2 hours about everything else. And we get along very well with President Xi and with China. Did President agree to restart the flow of rare minerals in? Yes, he did. He's no longer shouting about tariffs. He's thanking President Xi for restarting mineral supplies as if he's receiving a gift, not recovering from a crisis he caused. So, what really happened? Trump started this trade war with big words and heavy tariffs. He said China would lose. He promised American companies would come back stronger, but none of that happened. Instead, factories began to panic. Industries began to stall. Military and tech leaders raised alarms. And now Trump is on camera smiling and calling it a very good talk. Happy to announce that China will restart what they had already been providing before the war began. That's not a win, that's a retreat. Trump is not leading a negotiation. He's trying to clean up his own mess without admitting he caused it very seriously. And we've got to get the trade talks back on track. Both sides are really reeling from not so much the tariffs, but all the countermeasures that have been aimed at each other. And American factories are in danger of shutting down because they don't have access to these rare earths, especially these rare earth magnets that are predominantly made and supplied by China. The damage is no longer hidden. Gary Lockach makes it clear this isn't just about trade deals, it's about economic survival. The trade war didn't just sting, it shook the foundation of America's economy.